So this book break video has a really exciting twist because this time you have the chance to win every single book I'm about to mention. I've got 10 books here, gorgeous classics, a mixture of these lovely blue and gold Macmillan Collector's Library editions and some amazing Picador classics here as well. So stay tuned to the end of this video and I'll let you know how you can win all of these books. So if you hadn't guessed from me just showing you, today's video is going to be all about classics. But we were talking about how with classics, it's really easy to assume that there's only one type of author who wrote these classics, because often those are the ones that get talked about the most and get taught in schools the most. But actually, all kinds of different authors have been writing amazing books for centuries. So in this video, I've got a selection of 10 classics here, written by a really diverse range of authors. And a lot of these authors had to struggle against different forms of oppression in order to get their voices heard. And some of the books are now really, really famous. Some of them you would have read 100 times. And some of them, hopefully there might be some here you hadn't heard of before, so I add something to your reading list. But clear some space on your bookshelves, because I've got 10 books here and you might be going home with all 10 of them. Oh, and if you want to know where I am today, what this amazing bookish backdrop is, I will link everything in the description box below so you can check out how you can visit the Fable Bar and sit in this amazing table for book lovers. So starting with a really beloved classic, I've got Orlando by Virginia Woolf, which is an exploration of the fluidity of gender and sexuality, which in its own time, and to be honest still now, was completely revolutionary. So Virginia Woolf was herself bisexual, and she modelled the character of Orlando on her lover Vita Sackville West, who was another really interesting woman who completely defied all of the gender stereotypes of her day. And because of the way that she inspired Orlando, Vita Sackville West's son called Orlando the longest and most charming love letter in literature. And Virginia Woolf also struggled with mental health problems and tragically in the end took her own life by drowning. And her legacy today is completely amazing. She's still considered one of the greatest feminist writers, and her writing about both mental health and bisexuality have really helped to lessen the stigma against both of them. And while we're on the topic of amazing women, I've got a book here by Fran Ross. This is Oreo, which is a satire about a mixed-race girl on a quest to find out about her white father. And it's kind of a retelling of the myth of Theseus and kind of the Odyssey, but without any of the neat wrapping ups of the ending. Both because of the content and the style, this is a novel that was so far ahead of its time that when it was published back in the 70s, it was pretty much ignored. But now is definitely the time to read this one. Now, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran is one of the most translated books in history. It's been translated into over 100 languages. It was originally written in English by the Lebanese-American author Khalil Gibran. It's a collection of poetry prose fables that are really beloved now, but for a long time were ignored by the literary establishment in the West and really unfairly dismissed as not having substance. But actually, it's this rather amazing, non-traditional, non-judgmental spiritual guide that breaks away from the orthodox religions to offer something much more accessible to everyone. Now for a book that hasn't been ignored, and thank goodness because it's brilliant, The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. So this is a very funny, farcical play about two friends both impersonating a fictional character called Ernest, and it's completely ridiculous and wonderful. But Oscar Wilde, despite his success, spent 2 years in prison for gross indecency. He was imprisoned simply for being gay and having relationships with men, and he suffered terrible public persecution, and his time in prison had really dangerous effects on his health. But despite all of that, while in prison, Oscar Wilde wrote this really powerful letter all about not regretting or denying who he was. Okay, so now we're going way further back in time to a book that was first published in 1355, The Travels of Ibn Battuta. So Ibn Battuta was a Moroccan Muslim man who was just 21 when he set off to explore the world, like so many of us do. But whereas I spent about a month drinking cheap vodka in different seedy bars across Europe and then ran out of euros and came home, he didn't come home for another 29 years. In that time, he visited over 40 countries, from China to Russia to Tanzania, and he wrote about all of his journeys in here. So this book is a travel book, a history book, an autobiography, and he writes about everything from the culture to the scenery to even the food of the different places that he visited. So it's a completely amazing journey. Now, a novelist who used his work to write about his own disability was Fyodor Dostoevsky, who suffered from epilepsy. And you will find characters with epilepsy throughout his writing, and all written in a way to deliberately avoid the cliches of the time, but instead to actually portray portray the reality of the condition as Dostoevsky himself experienced it. And his most famous novel is, of course, Crime and Punishment, which is about the moral anguish of an ex-student who formulates a plan to kill a pawnbroker for her money. Now, for a perspective that we definitely don't see represented very often, I'm turning to Suzaku Andy, who wrote from the perspective of being a Japanese Roman Catholic. So he wrote the novel Silence, which is a historical fiction novel about a Portuguese Jesuit missionary sent to 17th century Japan, where Christians were being really severely persecuted. So this is a really powerful book that's been turned into a film 3 times, once by a Japanese director, once by a Portuguese director, and once by the American Martin Scorsese. Now, something I never knew before about a very famous author, Alexandre Dumas, is that he was mixed race, and that his father was actually born into slavery, the child of a black slave, Mary Sasset Dumas, and her French nobleman master. So as an adult, Alexandre Dumas adopted his grandmother's surname instead of continuing to use his white slave-owning grandfather's name. And he did face a lot of racism in his time, even while he was very successful, with critics using racist caricatures to make fun of him, and his fellow novelists using his race to dismiss him. But despite that, The Three Musketeers has gone on to become the beloved novel it is today. It's a brilliant historical adventure novel with 4 swashbuckling heroes living in 17th century France. There's plenty of romance and plenty of jewels. One of my favourites of the Picador classics is Trumpet by the Scottish author Jackie Cain. So this is about a fictional, famous black jazz musician, Joss Moody, who has died shortly before the novel starts, and is discovered after his death to have been transgender, which was known to nobody except his wife. So his son feels particularly betrayed by this secret having been kept, and in anger outs his father to a journalist. So suddenly his father's identity becomes incredibly public and is in the hands of people who want to dissect it without caring or considering who Joss Moody really was and who he saw himself as. And so the book is about really exploring that relationship between the father and son in retrospect, which had already been very complicated even before this. They had also navigated very different experiences of their own racial identities, for example. So the book is about race, it's about gender, it's about public versus private and performance, it's about identity, and it's about love. And finally, The Stranger's Child by Alan Hollinghurst is a book that spans a whole century of a family myth. So it starts in the summer of 1913 when George Sewell brings his Cambridge friend Cecil home. And Cecil is this handsome young aristocratic poet who both George and his younger sister Daphne are completely enthralled by. And while he's staying with them, Cecil writes a poem that both George and Daphne believe is about them. After Cecil is killed in the war, the poem then becomes famous. And so we then follow the next few decades, touching in on a few different time periods, the fame of the poem and Cecil's changing reputation as a poet, until we meet a biographer who is determined to go back and unearth the secrets from that first summer. So how do you win all 10 of these amazing books? All you have to do is leave a comment below featuring a book emoji. And the competition will be open until 4 p.m. on the 12th of September, so you've got exactly 2 weeks to get commenting. The full terms and conditions are linked in the description box below if you want to go and check them out, and the winner will be chosen by random prize draw. So good luck! And in the meantime, do give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment if you have any diverse classics of your own that you'd like to recommend. And of course, do hit that subscribe button below because we post new videos every Thursday. And coming up next week, we're going to be talking about feminist dystopia books, that very popular genre. And if you want to go behind the scenes with Book Break, do go and follow us over on Instagram at Book Break UK. See you next time.